All right, ready for a deep dive. Today, it's how to win friends and influence people. But we're not just skimming the surface. We're going for those aha moments,
Yeah.
the stories and examples that make this book legendary.
It's amazing, isn't it, how relevant this book still is after almost a century.
Totally. It's like he tapped into some fundamental truths about human nature.
He really did. And he had this knack for weaving those truths into these unforgettable stories.
Right, like that one about the art dealer who could talk for hours about boats.
Oh, yeah, even though he knew nothing about them.
Turns out he was just feigning interest to keep Carnegie engaged.
That story, to me, just perfectly illustrates the power of genuine interest. And it really is about more than just, listening politely. It's about that deeper curiosity.
It's like you're saying, I value your perspective.
Exactly. And when you do that, you create a connection. It disarms people. It opens the door for real conversation.
Which is something even someone like Napoleon struggled with.
It's true. Carnegie argues that Napoleon, with all his power and influence, had a hard time making genuine connections.
All because he lacked that key ingredient.
Yeah.
Genuine interest.
Exactly. And he contrasts Napoleon with someone like Howard Thurston, the magician.
Yeah.
Thurston was known for remembering even the smallest details about people.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And this wasn't just a party trick for him. It was the foundation of building those genuine, lasting connections. It makes you think, what if we all put in that kind of effort?
Imagine the difference it could make. Not just in our personal lives, but our careers, too.
Absolutely. Which actually segues perfectly into Carnegie's thoughts on handling disagreements.
Okay, let's talk about that because, let's be honest, disagreements happen.
They do. And Carnegie actually tells this pretty funny story about himself getting into a heated debate over a Shakespeare quote.
No way.
Oh, yeah. Only to find out he had it all wrong.
You're kidding.
Turns out the quote was from the Bible. It was a humbling experience for Carnegie, but it perfectly illustrates how easily our egos can get in the way of productive conversations.
So how do we avoid those ego-driven arguments? Because, trust me, I've been there.
Haven't we all? Well, Carnegie points to Benjamin Franklin as a prime example. He talks about Franklin's transformation from this argumentative young man to the diplomatic statesman we all know.
Right.
One of Franklin's simple but effective tricks was simply swapping out words like certainly with it appears to me.
Huh. It seems so small.
Right. But such a subtle shift in language can completely change the tone. It invites dialogue instead of shutting it down.
Because you're not saying this is the absolute truth. You're saying this is my perspective.
Exactly. And Carnegie gives a great modern example of this. There's this Connecticut attorney, and he's dreading a visit with his wife's aunt.
Oh.
Yeah, she was known to be quite argumentative.
I know the type.
Right. So instead of, going in there ready for a battle, he decides to focus on what he genuinely appreciates about her home.
He chose admiration over argument. I love that.
And you know what? It worked. By focusing on shared interests, on genuine appreciation, he completely disarmed the situation.
And it makes you realize how powerful appreciation can be. Just acknowledging the good.
Oh, absolutely. It can really change the whole dynamic. Carnegie tells this story about an industrial engineer, brilliant at her job, but she was constantly butting heads with her superiors.
Oh, I know the type.
Right. And she was so focused on proving them wrong that she couldn't get this new system she designed implemented.
Sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It was, until she came across Carnegie's book, actually.
Really?
Yeah. It was like a light bulb moment for her. She realized she had to change her whole approach. Instead of forcing her ideas on everyone, she let her team take ownership of the solution.
So she put her ego aside and embraced collaboration.
Exactly. And the results speak for themselves. By letting go of that need to be right all the time, she actually created a much more collaborative and ultimately more successful outcome.
It's so true. It reminds me of that saying, people support what they help to create. But it's not just about holding back criticism, is it? It's also about giving genuine appreciation.
100%. And Carnegie actually highlights this with a story about a young printer. The guy was initially doing really sloppy work,
Oh, no.
But one day, his boss noticed a small improvement. And instead of just, letting it slide, he went out of his way to praise the young man specifically for that improvement.
Wow, I bet that meant the world to that young printer. Sometimes that's all it takes, a little encouragement.
It's true. And it's amazing how far a little encouragement can go. It's not just about showering people with compliments either.
So how do you encourage effectively?
Carnegie uses this really interesting example from the world of get this, dog and pony training.
Okay, now I have to hear this. How do you encourage a pony? Sugar cubes.
Think about it. You're a trainer working with a dog on a new trick. You could focus on every stumble, every mistake.
Right.
But what kind of message does that send?
That you're failing.
Yeah. It's going to discourage the dog, hinder its progress. But if you praise even the slightest improvement, you're reinforcing the behavior you want to see.
It's about creating that positive feedback loop. And that applies to so much more than just training animals.
Exactly. It's about recognizing effort, even if the outcome isn't perfect yet.
And that kind of encouragement can be so powerful, especially when you're dealing with setbacks or you're feeling a lack of confidence.
Speaking of, Carnegie even uses the example of Enrico Caruso, the famous opera singer.
Yeah.
He wasn't always this picture of confidence,
Really? I would never again.
Oh, yeah. Even at the height of his career, he had these moments of intense self-doubt.
Wow. So even the most talented people at the top of their game, need encouragement sometimes.
It's true. It's a good reminder for all of us. And, Carnegie also mentions Charles Dickens.
Oh, sure.
He once said, "A word of encouragement at the right time is more precious than an hour of praise after the task is done."
Isn't that the truth? It's all about timing.
Absolutely. And Carnegie actually shares this really endearing story about his own experience. He was taking dance lessons.
I did not know that about Dale Carnegie.
Right. He was convinced he had 2 left feet. But his instructor, she just refused to focus on his clumsiness.
That's sweet.
She just kept emphasizing his potential. And it was that belief in him that actually helped him improve.
I love that. It just goes to show how much our beliefs, both about ourselves and others, can really influence our actions and ultimately our outcomes.
It's so true. And, this ties in directly with Carnegie's point about the importance of letting others save face.
What does that mean?
Well, he tells this great story about a White House secretary. Apparently, this woman was absolutely incredible at her job.
Okay.
Except for one small detail. Her punctuation was all over the place.
Oh, no. Every boss's nightmare.
Right. It could have been a really tough conversation. But her boss, he was a master of diplomacy.
I bet he was, working in the White House.
Exactly. He knew that if he came at her directly with criticism, it would just make her defensive.
For sure. So how did he handle it?
Instead of leading with the criticism, he started by showering her with compliments, praising her work ethic, her efficiency, how valuable she was to the team.
Laying it on thick.
And then, almost like an afterthought, he gently suggests that maybe she could brush up on her punctuation.
Smooth move.
Yeah.
He sandwiched the constructive criticism, right?
Yeah.
Between 2 layers of, pure praise.
Exactly. And it worked. She wasn't offended at all. In fact, she really appreciated his feedback.
It makes you think, how differently could that have gone if he'd just, gone straight for the criticism?
Oh, it would have been a completely different story. It's true what they say. You get more flies with honey than vinegar.
Right, but we all want to feel respected, valued.
Absolutely. And when we feel respected, we're much more likely to actually hear the feedback, even if it's not all sunshine and roses.
It's about guidance, not dictation.
100%. Like Owen D. Young said, people are more willing to accept suggestions than orders. And sometimes that guidance, it can be as simple as just believing in someone, even when they don't believe in themselves.
I love that. And Carnegie tells this really heartwarming story about Marie. She was a dishwasher, and she was incredibly shy, incredibly self-conscious.
Oh, yeah, I remember Marie.
And she just felt invisible, like nobody really saw her,
That feeling of invisibility is so real. It can be really tough to overcome.
It is. But then one day, somebody, it might have been a customer, it might have been a coworker, but somebody said to her, "You don't know what treasures are within you."
Wow.
That one sentence, just that belief in her potential, it changed everything.
Isn't that amazing? The power of our words.
It really is. From that moment on, Marie she carried herself differently, more confidence. She even ended up marrying the chef's nephew.
I love that. It's like a real-life fairy tale.
It is. And it just shows the incredible power of a good reputation. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it?
It is. When you believe in someone, when you give them a reputation to live up to, it can really inspire them to become that person.
Absolutely. And it's not just about, praising the qualities that are already there.
Yeah.
It's about seeing the potential, even when it's not immediately obvious.
Right. And Carnegie, who shares another great story about this, it's about a teacher, Mrs. Hopkins, and she had this student, Tommy. Now, Tommy was, shall we say, a handful.
Oh, no. Every teacher's nightmare.
Exactly. Disruptive, disrespectful, you name it. But on the first day of school, Mrs. Hopkins, she looks Tommy straight in the eye and says, Tommy, I understand you're a natural leader.
She didn't. That's a bold move.
Right. I mean, talk about giving someone a reputation to live up to.
So what happened? Did it backfire?
Not at all. Tommy was floored. Nobody had ever called him a leader before. And you know what? He rose to the occasion. He became a model student. Everybody was amazed.
Wow. It just makes you wonder how many Tommies are out there, just waiting for someone to see that potential, even if it's buried under a few layers.
Exactly. And I think that's really the core message of how to win friends and influence people. Deep down, we all crave appreciation. We crave respect.
We want to feel important.
Yes. And when we can tap into those desires in others, when we can look for the best in them, inspire them to see it in themselves, that's when we can really unlock some extraordinary possibilities.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into how to win friends and influence people, maybe the question we leave with is this. What seemingly insignificant gesture, what word, what action could you offer today to unlock that potential in the people around you?